So why am I re-reviewing the second season to a show that I spent 2.5 hours discussing how terrible it is and when I can do anything else? Well, that's a long story that comes down to Rooster Teeth being fascist dicks and constantly filing fraudulent copyright claims against my reviews. So that's the thing that needs to be addressed, and some of you would know I'm a very petty bastard. So they've been claiming my videos for a while now, but it really started sometime after I uploaded them. It was the standard shtick you'd get from the average corporation, but it did upset me because Rooster Teeth was this amazing example of a group of guys getting together and becoming very successful business people. To see these guys slump so low that they'd happily jump on the anti-First Amendment bandwagon just because Google allows them to do so was rather disheartening for me. Then Monty died and all of a sudden this became something else. It happened again and again and again and again and again and again to the point where this is insane and incredibly childish. It's gotten to the point that they're manually filing claims against my videos, which is just fantastic. Google's copyright system is purely animated, and videos get claimed if the automated system scans certain frames, and then it goes to the company who then randomly pushes a button that says take the rights away for the video or take it down. But this is someone at Rooster Teeth getting paid to go to my channel after they decide not to sue me for copyright infringement, and then reclaim the video for the very thing they decided they weren't going to sue me for. I don't normally like to tell people how to do the things that they do, but that's how you troll a damn $1 million company. Hell, you couldn't ask for more as an asshole on the internet. I know if I was the owner of a $1 million company, a fat asshole on the internet that only has 172 subscribers wouldn't even be on my radar, much less something I'd put resources towards, even the amount as small as Rooster Teeth is putting towards me. The sad thing is, in all likelihood, this has come to an end as Rooster Teeth has cheated me out of a tiny dick measuring competition. They've stopped. And not that they've stopped filing the claims, but they've somehow stopped the requirement that if they don't respond in a certain amount of time, the video goes back up in good standing. I've waited 2 months for them to respond, when they should have only had 30 days to file a claim. Now, for the last 7 months, they've been waiting to the very last day to file these claims to be as much of a dick as they possibly can be, and I respect that so much. So I didn't notice for a while because the wait has become normal. But this sucks because I can no longer defend my copyright. No matter how disgusting these practices are, we have all agreed to this shit when we signed up for our YouTube accounts. So I'm going to do the one thing I know that I can do best. Exacerbate the shit out of an already terrible situation. So before I go elbow deep in Rwby again, let's talk about some stuff that might just piss off a few people at Rooster Teeth. First, let's talk about Monty dying. Now before you think I'm going to be a massive dick about this, I'm actually going to say this for the more positive aspect of this whole mess. Like I said before, he died and then the shit really hit the fan, which really does clarify some things that I believe was going down at Rooster Teeth. So his death, no matter how sad, and the world is a much worse off place without Monty, this still vindicates him from a lot of bad things. I thought the first claims were coming from Monty himself because my first 2 videos I did attack him for his lack of artistic integrity. But as time went on, this seems like this was just the build-up to Fullscreen's acquisition of Rooster Teeth. I can't prove this, but it is in line with other murders like Twitch being bought out by Amazon creating similar problems, and I find it harder to believe otherwise. Oh, by the way, I really hope for the best of Rooster Teeth in the manner of the acquisition, even though it's not needed even in the slightest and it's never backfired for the developer at all. Nope, not even a little. Either way, I'm sorry that you've died, and I give my condolences to your family and friends. See you later, buddy. Now let's get into the idea of copyright and why no one at Rooster Teeth, or at the very least the No, really doesn't understand the concept behind it. So Angry Joe did what Angry Joe does, and then the No put up this video, and it really does prove that they have no ethical standard at all. Or there's a level of stupidity that shouldn't even be possible. So let's take a look at what was said.
He goes on to say he's washing his hands of Nintendo altogether and will no longer be featuring them on his channel, and even tries to nip haters in the bud by saying, and before you haters even fucking say it, yes, Nintendo may have a legal basis to be a fucking dick, but it doesn't mean they have to do this.
A couple of things here. First, they don't have the legal basis to take down our videos, which I will explain shortly. Now, they do have a legal basis to literally be a fucking dick, as Joe says, because Google's policies and the contract we have signed to be part of those policies proves we agreed to this. I doubt Joe was talking about this and was actually referring to the copyright, though. Now, I really don't know what the copyright laws in Japan are, but I have a decent grasp on the copyright laws in the United States. And unless they get rewritten sometime soon, both reviews and Let's Plays clearly rest under the fair use doctrine. Now, I'm not going to walk through all of this, but it's pretty easy to see how all of this applies to our First Amendment rights. Again, the DMCA could easily be rewritten to exclude Let's Plays, but video games are a really weird entry into this discussion because it's a collection of mediums. And another thing that adds to the vagueness is the fact that games are pre-rendered. Unlike a movie or a song where the data you're using for the reviews is a copy of the master file, video game footage used in the reviews and Let's Plays are wholly unique to the person capturing the footage, giving a fairly strong claim that the Let's Players own the footage they're using more so than the developers because it's their machines that created the footage, albeit with the developer's software and assets. But then you have to understand what copyright is, and it takes this pseudo-intellectual discussion and makes it pointless. Copyright is the rights for the owner of the original to control the copying and distribution of the original. Gameplay footage, unless we're talking about things unreleased, has little to do with the original copyright. This is kind of like having a patent on every aspect of a car and then claiming the distance I have moved or the speed I am moving somehow is connected to the original patent. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to copyright gameplay footage, as it is a video with a bunch of assets in them, but the footage until recorded technically doesn't exist both before and after the software is shut down. Long story short, what is being uploaded to YouTube isn't the software that has the actual copyright on it, so even though so many people argue about the whole amount used aspect of the DMCA, when the use is zero, we have little to discuss. So yeah, there's some food for thought. Moving on, we have this wonderful line.
Alright, well, it turns out the legal basis wasn't actually the sticking point for a very famous detractor who had an issue with Vargas.
If you hadn't seen the video yet, they're referring to the creator of God of War making a comment about Angry Joe's video. The thing that makes this so funny is that the point is literally about the legal basis of this argument. Whoever wrote that line is retarded. Then getting to his statement itself, he claims that if a game company doesn't want its gameplay footage on a website, we have to respect its wishes. Did you read that? A company can control the critical discussion of the content it creates if it so desires, and we should respect that. That is completely unconstitutional and fucking disgusting. Angry Joe is being a massive baby, but at least he wasn't saying fuck civil rights, fuck the Constitution, and fuck democracy. Do you people not care about freedom of speech? Are you such an evil company now that you'd rather push fascist ideas rather than admit you're being massive cunts? Your natural rights are not something you should take lightly, and the idea of a company could control what is said about its product should mortify you to the core. Let's move on to Rwby, so I can stop just bitching about how Rooster Teeth is being inept. Speaking of Rooster Teeth being inept, we are now going to talk about Fatmanfalling review of the second season. Why? Despite the fact that I've watched it 6 times, I do have some problems with it. Not like the problems I have with Rwby and Rooster Teeth, but still problems. So I'm going to use his review as a jumping off point to continue to critique the series. Just know that this will in all likelihood lead to me getting upset, but most of that will not be aimed at you, buddy. My friend, my fellow warrior. I mean, some of it's going to be aimed at you, but most of it will be aimed at Rooster Teeth. The first thing I want to cover is the question why. As in, why did you cover this series in depth? Of course, I know why you covered it. You know why you covered it, and I'm sure you know why I reviewed it, but I'm speaking more generally here. My philosophy on the matter is, why would I take time to evaluate any aspect of the show or game when its base narrative is so bad and offensive? This is something that I contemplate all the time, and it's weird that every time this question is brought up, it seems to be ignored. Now, I know I present this topic to things generally loved by a lot of people, but I can't help taking real offense to objective problems in a narrative. And this is quite often characters acting irrationally stupid without any reasonable setup as to why they're acting so stupid. One such example is Game of Thrones. From time to time, characters will act stupid for no reason, and it really bothers me, especially since everyone that talks about this series says how great the writing is. But I never hear people bring up these issues. So when people are discussing the thematic elements between Robb Stark and Grey Wind, I always have to say, how about we talk about the one scene that is so bad it prevented me from watching the series ever again? No? Okay, well, that's fine too, I guess. The point I'm trying to make is we really need to answer these questions in the proper order and not assume automatically that the crap we watch is good just because we like it. Also, Rwby doesn't deserve to be analyzed any deeper because it's truly bad on every level. But since the creators are fascist pricks, we might as well peel off the first layer and really understand how terrible this is. The first part in which Fatmanfalling completely ruins his own intellectual integrity is with this line.
The lighting. Oh, the lighting. Yes, that's right, shit has shadows now, and there's bloom and glow and reflections and all that other stuff that Volume 1 was so sorely lacking. And it looks quite amazing.
And by that I mean he's praising the lighting about 83% more than it ought to be. And yes, I did read the text. What is creating this response is more of the people getting laid because of the lighting thing. This is generic lighting, and it really shouldn't be praised more than, "You did it! What a good boy!" This show has extremely low production values, and I get the fact that Rooster Teeth didn't give them any money, but at the very least they should have the equipment Red vs. Blue has. And I got the lack of quality lighting from the show because it greatly reduces rendering time. But why would this ever be an issue? Unless the show is created like South Park and is going out just after it's finished, why do you need such short rendering times? Rooster Teeth is a company worth millions of dollars, so I find it hard to believe that they don't have an at least $20,000 rendering farm. So back to the lighting. It's alright in the second season. But just alright. The overly simplistic character models kind of ruin it and flattens everything out. But this is not Crysis, and this is nothing more than simple settings in Poser, or whatever software they're using to render this stuff out. If this was another show, I would have just rolled my eyes at the comment, but let's keep our discussion to an appropriate level of pessimism when we're discussing Rwby. Because if you let this laziness go, they'll get worse and worse about things that only take a short amount of time setting up. Then we have this, and I swear, most of this review is meant to be aimed at Rooster Teeth and not at you. I guess most of the points I have thought up, I did so out of order of your review. But the whole penny thing seems to be a bit much. I know it's for comedic effect, but you can be funny without undermining your points. And I know this because most of the time you do and don't. But this and the Huntsman thing especially comes off grating because both of the volume and the excessiveness of the points. While it's fairly easy to say that Penny was invited by Ironwood, or she pestered him to allow her to go, the Huntsman point really does come off worse. Now, you are extremely correct because do they establish the Huntsman? No, and that's because they don't establish anything. But you're taking a simple writing and production flaw and pushing it to places we both know doesn't exist. Because if Huntsmen do die at the rates that you're describing, we know that they would have used that to manipulate the audience in as underhanded and lazy way as possible. I think they just rip off the monument scene from Naruto given what we have seen from the show so far. So the one thing we know based on established writing capabilities of the staff is that the Huntsmen are badass, even though we've seen like 5 of them so far. So it seems like they wouldn't be dying like flies. But yes, ultimately we know nothing about the Huntsmen, and your point is extremely valid and sound. Just don't grind it into us next time, buddy, or I'll write a novel based on your character and write some convoluted backstory that you won't even be able to read.
The setting of your story wasn't born in the opening scene. You have to write your story as if the world it takes place in was functional before the main character gets introduced. Otherwise, everyone in the audience capable of conscious thought will have to ask themselves stupid questions like this in order to justify your incompetence against the narrative.
No complaint. I think that's just a great point to make.
So Blake shoots this fuse box and the lights go out. And fine, that follows logically.
Now I get your point about aura being poorly defined and unbalanced, but I think there's a simpler problem that needs to be discussed. Why was there a fuse box just sitting out in the open like that? There's a reason why businesses tend to have their wiring in such a way that all of this is tucked away somewhere, and it's to prevent this very thing from happening. Accidents happen, and losing all the power in the building is a terrible thing and easily preventable. Yes, the writers are retarded and went against continuity that they themselves established, but I find this to be a very pleasant cherry on top. So point 136 for real-world things that is contradicted in Rwby, and it really shouldn't be.
I feel obliged to point out yet another glaring inconsistency in the lore of the show. Or maybe it's an animation error. I've given up trying to distinguish between the two.
This isn't an animation or a writing problem. It's a we like to watch movies and TV shows and copy what they do kind of a problem. If all of the other characters were on foot, they would have outran the robot as well. How do I know this? Well, it comes from the really retarded and overused cinematic framing device of the guys getting chased constantly outrunning something in every shot, even though the thing that is chasing them is always shown being faster than them in each and every shot. This is something that only shows up in terrible things like After Earth, and it's only there because creating real tension in chase scenes requires a director that's not brain dead. It's funny how every bit of continuity in the show is either contradicted or ignored in the show. Because if the Faunus are super fast, then why does this never show up before in the series? Why didn't Team Rwby have the advantage in the food fight? Is it because Pierre is just that good? Why was Torchwick able to take both Blake and Sun at the same time if they were so much faster than him? But then again, they jump back and forth from him being an incompetent shrew to him being able to block shotgun shots at close range, so why would they care about any other continuity? Really, the thing we have to ask is, will a mech like that be able to outrun cars? Because that seems like a big no. Something that big and bulky would probably not be able to outrun cars.
Why would they just abandon them like this is a simple walk? What? Why are the visual gags in this show so funny?
So let's talk about the visual humor for a little bit, because we all know it needs to be talked about. So a simple walk is the name of a Chinese food place in the middle of Vale, and its name is meant to be taken humorously. But, and this is a very big but, it's not funny in the slightest. This is mostly due to the fact that it's ripping off South Park and its running gag that has been in the show for at least 14 seasons. It's fairly obvious it's attempting to harp off the show, and that's more harmful than not. First, the South Park counterpart is significantly better along with it being first. But the depth of the joke is where the entire thing becomes much easier to mindlessly judge Rooster Teeth for being so lazy. Shitty Walk is simply a childish joke that lets Matt and Trey say the word shit on TV without getting censored, giving it at least that base gratification. But the beauty of the joke comes from the extremely overgeneralized Chinese stereotypes that plays against actual racism. This joke is run into the ground completely, and yet still is entertaining every time it's brought up. And then we have the most basic aspect of it, which is Asians pronounce words funny. Now looking back towards Rwby's side, we have a simple walk, which again is copying off of South Park. Is nothing more than Asians pronounce words funny. So when I say this isn't funny, I'm not saying it doesn't fit with my sense of humor. When I say this isn't funny, I mean this isn't a joke. And this is the same for most of the visual humor for the show. The scene with Neptune wobbling around is also not funny because it's also not a joke. Because the joke is either he is attracted to Yang, which is not a joke, or he has an erection, which again is not a joke. Or, giving some credence that this is in fact a joke, the joke is look at him, he's looking like a willy the way he's acting. Isn't that funny? At least this might be a joke, but just a very lazy one. Damn it. This is the reason why I don't want to review this series in depth. Every time I watch the show, I find a million new things to complain about, and the obsession is bad enough as it is.
Maybe Kevin James stuck both hands in a blender before he wrote the script. Because it's all fucked up, you get it? That's a joke, you fat fuck!
I want to show Pyrrha beating the crap out of all of Team Cardinal in a preliminary tournament qualifier.
Yes.
I will talk more about the commentary a little later on, but this is a really strong point for ignoring the developer commentary in its entirety. What an average viewer will see is a sparring session that is for some reason uneven, but whatever appears just that awesome. Now why would these stupid and uneducated viewers believe this to be a sparring match? First, this has been established in Season 1 where we were first discussing the tournament, and this fight is even being held in the same room as it was before, which just blows my mind. And second, and I know this is a bit difficult to understand, but bear with me, just seconds after the Pyrrha fight with Team Cardin, the professor literally states, word for word, but we have time for one more sparring match. So not only does the scene look like a bunch of kids are sitting around watching a sparring match, you have the person overseeing the preliminary qualifier call it a sparring match. Or maybe that was the whole qualifier and the teacher just decided to throw in a sparring match to spice things up. People wonder why I have so many problems with the people behind Rwby and its fan base, and if I haven't made it clear in the 6 videos I put up about this, there's no way that I can articulate how offensive all of this is to me. But then this line is spoken.
Well done, Miss Nikos. You should have no problem qualifying for the tournament.
No teacher would ever, just after administrating over a preliminary qualifying match, would ever tell their students that they would easily qualify for a tournament, because of course she would easily qualify, because she just did. This is why what the developers have to say about something shouldn't be taken seriously, or at the very most, it should help us understand what we've already contemplated on and should not be the foundation of the discussion of a particular work. Sorry, I don't mean to be a screaming asshole about this, guys, but this really does ruin this form of articulation for me. After this, I will no longer value any discourse like this from now on. Feel free to do as you please, but I will never consider this on the same level of intellectualism as its counterparts. You bastards! How could you ruin thinking for me?
I mean, the whole point of Pyrrha's character is that she keeps her semblance a secret.
We could just keep it our little secret.
The whole point of Pyrrha's character is not hiding her semblance, it's being a badass fighter that likes showing off and being indestructible. And liking John. The semblance thing as presented in the show, remember, we're going to ignore that awful commentary, is nothing more than Pyrrha not openly talking about it. When Pyrrha says, let's keep this between us, it's not presented as some grandiose fact that if the world knew, everything would be ruined. She's saying, let's not talk about this outside of the group. And then the other time it's mentioned, it's almost completely retarded. In a world where everyone has unique superpowers, who would broadcast their power? Everyone has been training for the last year, maybe, for a tournament against the best and the brightest from all the schools. Only an idiot or an arrogant prick would go around telling everyone what their superpower was, because if people knew what that power was, they would work around it. If you knew you had to get into a fist fight with Superman, you'd bring some kryptonite-covered brass knuckles with you. She doesn't tell people about her polarity because people would stop bringing metal to fights with her, making them harder for her. The entire thing just points out how inept the people behind the show are. Why are they claiming a character should actively be hiding something and then make that character do things that go against that stated behavior? Because remember, she fights all the time and uses her power somewhat openly. So either we have to take the idea that is presented in the show, you know, that finished product that you may or may not have paid for, or with what the developers wanted in the show, which begs the question, why wasn't it in the show?
Oh wow, I care about this Mary Sue so much because being too perfect is her flaw.
Wow, you're a heartless bastard. You're basically saying that Pierce should stop doing the thing that she's been doing her entire life, maybe even against her will for some of it, because it would make her more approachable. And this is just speculation on my part, but her being an accomplished fighter just might be the only thing she gets recognition for, despite being more than just a prized fighter. And I know it's 2015, but the whole women's right issue isn't over yet, and traditional gender roles are not completely gone, and those that are still prominent are in fact reinforced by society. It's still strange to have a woman take the lead in a relationship, and though I have no problem with this, it's easy to see how a woman might feel that she shouldn't try to take the first step. And then you have to factor in the fact that she's probably never lost a fight before. The fear of rejection might be too much for her to even consider it. Just some food for thought before you start spouting crap like you ought to stay in the kitchen and make jewelry. Tired of this sexist crap.
This was another one of those scenes, Carrie, where we just hit a wall.
Look, the reason you hit a wall is because this scene doesn't have any narrative flow. Your subconscious is trying to tell you that this scene doesn't belong here because it clashes so hard with the end of the last one.
There is a logical connection between these two scenes. It just so happens that it creates more plot holes than it solves, which is none. So Ironwood grabs Ruby and drags her off somewhere, like a holding cell of the principal's office, I don't know. And she goes, but it was the big boob chick that did it. And Ironwood says, we'll see about that, because, you know, he doesn't know who Ruby is. So then they go check the footage on the cameras, and yes, there are cameras everywhere, because if you're going to fill a forest up with cameras, you're going to have them around your military training school. So he quickly finds the footage of Ruby and Cinder fighting, and then find whatever hacking-esque thing she did before the fight, which means that when this gets brought up in the next season, it's going to be another continuity error because they would have fixed that. And then, if for some magical reason there wasn't a camera in the hallway where she took her mask off, and for some other magical reason that there isn't a camera in the dance hall where everyone is, they would have been able to piece together that Cinder was the person who attacked the school just by going through the footage of the fight and looking through all the dossiers of the current students and visiting students. So then the Three Stooges get apprehended, and there goes the entire show. Once again, the narrative collapses in on itself, and there is nothing we can do about it. Then, for some reason, they release Ruby much later on when it's light out, or they have a 12-hour discussion and then call Ruby in, and there we go. Based on what was shown so far, that is what logically happened between the two episodes.
As it is right now, it feels like I'm being rewarded for paying attention to the whole frame.
Are you paying attention to the whole frame? Are you really, my friend? Because I know I was, and I really wish I hadn't. Now, I know you know nothing about animation, and neither do I, as I'm showing on the screen right now, but hell, at least I try. Now get back, Falling, because it's time to whip some spoiled rotten ass. Remember my review of the production diaries where I got really upset with the whole stylized animation thing they said? Yeah, that happened again in my brain, but this time it's not going away. So why? Why would having less cuts in your shot make the animation any harder? It makes no sense that this would even be a thing, but whatever. I wish I knew how long Forever was, because without it, I can't get properly upset about it. Now, if this took more than 3 hours to animate, I would have been insulted to my absolute core, as by myself I could have easily gotten the schlock done in that time, and that also includes me teaching myself how to use Poser. Shorter than that, well, maybe, but that explains the terrible animation, the lack of any keyframes, secondary animation, or any movement of any kind for 2 of the characters. Don't believe me? Let's play the greatest game of all time called Watch the Scene That Is Zoomed In on What I Was Talking About.
Can't exactly leave him here while we're gone for a week.
Look, there's a letter. Dear girls, I've got to leave the island for a few days, so I'm sending Zwei to you to take care of. Enclosed is all the food you should need. Love you both, Tai Yang.
What is he supposed to do with that?
Well, that settles it. Come on, girls. Zwei will be here when we get back.
Oh, I'll miss you so much. We're going to be best friends. I can't wait to see you again. You're such...
Boy, Scots, that's some of the best animation I've ever seen. All the time that went in that must have been months. I mean, some of the laser stuff I get. You're on a strict schedule and you can't spend all your time making everything nice. Thanks, Rooster Teeth. But when the number of keyframes is less than 60 for the entire scene and you talk about how great the shot is, you upset me a bit. Try not to do this again. Also, this is why I don't listen to the commentary. I hate bad commentary tracks. And with what little I've heard from this so far, it has nearly killed me.
If I had taken a job in Atlas, it wouldn't have changed anything.
So instead of taking a position of power in a corporate structure where you'd have the authority to affect company policy, you decide to become a huntress where, in all likelihood, you'll end up dying in a ditch somewhere.
Actually, what she is doing is far more likely to accomplish her goals rather than working for her father's company. If she did join the company, she would have to get past not only her family members, but also several higher-ups who are also looking to gun for her father's position. So the chance she'd get Game of Thrones by any number of people is fairly high. And even if she didn't, most massive corporations have a ton of bureaucratic messes to prevent radical changes from happening and keeping stock prices high at all costs. On the other hand, based off what Rwby think huntsmen are, it would seem that these guys are heralded as the heroes of the entire species and some of the most respected people out there. This is a childish notion, but as you've said many times before, we know nothing about huntsmen, and what little we are given, we have to assume that is true. So yes, going to her dad's company and murdering everyone that stands in her way would be more effective, if a bit extreme. But short-term, becoming a huntsman will be faster, and after she gets her fame and glory on the battlefield, it would give her more of an edge in the corporate game that she can be a part of when she's older and a bit more mature.
This is what storytelling is. Delivering exposition. So every time you say to yourself,
just enough exposition,
slap yourself in the face for being so wrong.
Now, I hate to be the bearer of nitpicky news, but you are technically wrong about the exposition. Your underlining message here is indeed correct, but technically wrong. Exposition is a literary device to simply fork over information. Your underlining point about what makes a good story, which is giving all the information the audience needs in a respectful manner, still stands, though. Now, these clowns, on the other hand, is a completely different story. Not only did they get the definition of the term wrong, they're also posing an idea that is the gross generalization of an appropriate amount of exposition, and that works for all shows, which I have to say, organized art, anyone. Why would we have any artistic integrity when we can pander to the audience like they're retarded children and simply use the lowest common denominators to get views? Yeah, let's make some stale, unartistically driven, math-based shows that won't cause assholes on the internet to spend hours complaining about our shitty writing. Oops!
Weiss gives Blake a thing, and where was she keeping that? And why was she holding on to it until now?
A point I think we both miss is the fact that A, that's not a lot of ammo, and B, if those are dust cartridges like I'm guessing they are, why would you want a random selection of dust flavors? If I'm going to be firing elements at people, I would like to know what I'm firing, and white, red, purple, blue is just a random selection of crap that really doesn't seem to be helpful for me.
The kingdom officially sealed off the tunnels, creating the world's largest tomb.
Holy hell, man. I was too busy seeing this as a stupid cliche kind of thing to even notice how depraved that whole thing is. Damn, that line about the tomb was perfect. And with that said, what an enjoyable review and what an awful show. I was planning on going further and discussing more, but this is nothing more than a petty retaliation because a child lost a tiny dick measuring competition, and I really don't see a point going any further. Mostly because I don't want to. So for Season 3, I will attempt to be more thorough in my reviews, both to add more to the discussion and because I'm a petty dick. And Rooster Teeth is a group of fascists who love to hate our Constitution. But with that said, I think 2 hours of content reviewing 4 hours of show is enough, and I hope you've enjoyed your stay. So see you next time, which will likely be soon because they began working on the fight scenes before they finished the script, which is childish. So very childish.